But after character creation, you finally get into the meat of the adventure, the things you guys all really want to know about. So first off, let's just go over my first impressions of the full release of this game, from someone that also played a ton of early access, and then after we can dive deeper into what makes this game so awesome. And well, everything is better. A lot better. The UI is much improved, including much easier to understand menus and inventories, a huge upgrade to the map that makes it actually enjoyable to use, and so many other little quality of life enhancements that I couldn't possibly list them all here. Before, every key and camping supply item you picked up took up a space in your inventory, but now you have little bags and key holders that simply take up one spot in your inventory, and all of those items of that type go into that holder, nice and organized without you having to do anything. On top of this, the game now has much more extensive crafting systems, where you can make all manner of different potions and items, all with materials you keep in your crafting pouch, so it's nice and organized in your inventory as well. Another quality of life improvement example is now when you send items to camp for resting at night, you no longer have to take them out of your stash and bring them over to your sleeping bag to use them. The game simply keeps track of all of your food in the stash. I can't stress enough how much better the game feels with all these little improvements from early access, and for those of you who didn't play the game before, just be thankful that you're getting a much more streamlined layout now, where there's way less time spent trying to manage your inventory full of useless clutter. But it's not just the UI and little tweaks that make the game feel better, it's bigger stuff too. First of all, the graphics are improved. They look really similar to before, but there's a little extra oomph that I can't quite explain that really makes some of the scenes pop, especially if you're on max settings with an HDR monitor like me. On top of this, the game runs great. On my machine, which has a 4090 and 13900K, I was able to run the game well over 100 frames the entire time on max settings with DLSS enabled. There are some small glitches here and there with lighting or dialogue, but nothing that bothered me at all, and I only had one hard crash my entire time playing this game so far, and that's on the press build. Don't take my word for it though, because like I said, I've only played the first parts of this game, and knowing Larian's track record with their last game, Divinity Original Sin 2, the later half could be much buggier and have a lot more issues, but I'm not sure yet. And also, I'm someone who loved Cyberpunk 2077 even on release, so I might not be the best person you want to listen to when it comes to bugs and glitches. They don't bother me as long as the core aspects of a game are great, but I will say, I didn't notice that much when I was playing Baldur's Gate. Another huge improvement in the full release is the fluidity of the game. Moving around and sifting through menus or really anything in motion feels a lot faster and more responsive. Before, sometimes especially during battles, it felt like my character was a semi-truck that I had to maneuver around, but now everything is much snappier and quicker. Combat seems to happen much faster, with enemies taking their turns quicker than before, and animations in general have been sped up, which makes combat and doing anything in game so much less of a chore. Even the autosaves that happen occasionally as you walk around finally are almost instantaneous. The turn-based combat and camera angle in this game is certainly not for everyone, but by making movement and actions happen quicker, I think Larian has done a good job at making a system even fans that were looking for something more traditional, like a third-person action system a la The Witcher, will be happy with. And if you were on the fence about this, I really recommend you give it a shot, because while it's not real-time like some other popular RPGs, being turn-based gives Baldur's Gate the distinct advantage of being very tactical. And with all the spells and different ways you can use them, spending some time each turn to plan out a strategy is super rewarding and fun. I wasn't the biggest fan of turn-based games and RPGs before, but Baldur's Gate has converted me. At least give it a shot. And without spoiling anything, there are some fights later in the game that are so crazy and exciting that really push you to your limits and make the combat early in Act 1 look like child's play. So even if you don't like it at first, give it some time, because as your characters level up and get some more abilities along with your enemies, the combat starts to become utterly captivating. And I can't imagine what the final act will be like now. On top of this too, the further you get into the game, the more and more rare items you find. And some of these have build-defining powers that will completely change how you play the game and tackle certain situations. One of my biggest complaints about early access was the lack of good or interesting loot that gave me those serotonin highs, but luckily this has been alleviated now in the full release without a doubt, and you will be finding tons of things all over now for each of your characters. Another really great change in the full game is the skill checks. It seems like a lot of them have been made harder in the release version from early access, and I think that's a great update. And that's because in Baldur's Gate, it's all about the dice roll, just like it would be at a D&D table. Whenever you try to persuade a character or picklock a door, or often when trying to accomplish anything in the world, you get met with a screen where you can roll a 20-sided die and add any modifiers you have in order to try and hit a specific number to pass the check. And whether you pass or fail, the game rewards you with real consequences for your actions and choices. The reason making the skill check system harder is awesome is because it makes it so you think about each decision more, whether it is for something you will say or something you will do. And honestly, I just think this system is so much better than what we see in other RPGs. For example, in one of the most beloved role-playing games of all time, Fallout New Vegas, when you do a speech check, you either have the stats or you don't. If you need 10 strength to push the NPC and you don't have it, you just can't choose that option. But in Baldur's Gate, when you choose an option, it's never a guarantee. There's always the chance the dice will or will not roll in your favor, just like when playing Dungeons and Dragons in real life. And this chaotic approach to decision making is so much more engaging and interesting in my opinion, because it makes you think more about each choice and whether it would be worth the risk and potential failure if it doesn't work. And also, it results in moments where you have critical failures or successes where you roll a 1 or 20 respectively and the check auto fails or succeeds. Stuff like that creates memories in our heads of that time something crazy happened that we least expected. And that kind of experience is so key to what makes Baldur's Gate 3 so amazing, especially with a world that is so reactive to everything you could possibly do. The one downside though of this sort of system is it really promotes save scumming, and I would imagine that the creators behind games like Fallout New Vegas specifically chose their system to limit this problem. Because in Baldur's Gate 3, if I critically fail a super important check and my character dies early on in the game, it's going to be really hard to stop myself from reloading the save to get that person back. All I can say is, I get it. It's hard for me too, but some of the best moments in this game occur when you just trust the dice and let them take you on the journey they will. Try not to reload saves when bad things happen, especially on your first playthrough, because that is what will make it your own journey. For the future though, I do hope Larian or some other studios can figure out a way to stop or limit save scumming with a dice roll system, because it really is just more interactive and fun, but it's hard to stop reloads at important moments. Another quick thing I want to touch on too is just how awesome the music in this game is. Whether it's the slower moments in your camp with melodies that are emotional and deep, or the fast-paced action beats in combat, the music in this game is absolutely phenomenal. And there were multiple times the tracks were so good, I just stopped playing and listened. I know most people say good video game music should be unrecognizable and just fit into the background, but I disagree. When a composer has done this good of a job, you hear it in your soul. And there were multiple times I was playing where the main character was the music, and I think this is a really awesome thing. And this extends to the sound effects too. Once you start getting to level 5 and above, some of the sound effects and animations on the spells are so awesome and make you feel really powerful. Overall, the game has just been greatly improved from early access, and the systems and overall game design is really superb. It's a foundation for an adventure I hope will only get better and better, but you'll have to wait for when I finish the game to know that. Regardless though, you can feel the passion and love the devs poured into this game, and I don't think I've ever played a big budget game quite like this where it feels like every single person in every department gave it their all, whether it was the writing, the story, gameplay, presentation, or just how the game manages to fire on all cylinders regardless of how you analyze it. This team and their leadership really care about this game, and I don't know that because I talk to them, I know it because I can see it when I play. What I can speak more about though is just how awesome the gameplay on offer here is. I mentioned earlier how many possibilities you have in character creation and dialogue choice, but something else the game has in droves is variety in combat. There are tons of different encounters with a wide array of enemies with different skill sets, and especially once you get to Act 2 and beyond, the stuff most people haven't seen yet, there are some really cool engagements that make you think and push you to your limits with your spells and equipment. The game, even on normal difficulty mode, can be seriously challenging at times, but always in a fair way. Every time I lost a fight and had to reload a save, it felt like it was my fault and I could have done something better. Oftentimes environments will have interesting things you can do, like when I fought a giant spider in a secret underground cave and kept dying to it, only to discover I could trick it into standing on one of its webs over a massive hole, and then I threw a fireball at the web which caused the spider to fall to its death. After which I casted Featherfall and floated down this massive chasm miles deep into a secret area, only to find the spider and loot its rotting corpse. Not only does each class have lots of choice outside of combat on how to structure their build, but within combat there are so many things you can do. One time I used my bard to play a song to distract some enemies while I casted a silence spell around some sleeping foes nearby and started to attack and kill them one by one. Not only did this silence magic negate their spells, meaning they could barely fight back, but it also muted their sounds, meaning when they started screaming for help from their nearby friends, no one could hear them, and instead they stayed lost in the trance of my song. Moments like this show just how deep Baldur's Gate 3 really is. Each and every spell can be used either in a straightforward combat sense, or oftentimes ingenious ways that make you so excited for all of the game's possibilities. For example, as a druid, you can wild shape into different animal forms with special abilities to fight in combat, but you can also change into these animals outside of combat to talk to other animals or scare townsfolk. And the game even accounts for you being in these wild shape animal forms when in cutscenes. Meaning if you transform into a giant spider and start talking to your companions, you will be treated to hilarious moments where your companions are calling you out, all while a high-level cutscene of a giant spider talking to people plays out. The fact that the game even reacts to these ridiculous things that you can do is a testament to just how deep it is. And trust me when I say there are a lot of things you can do in this game where you would expect the game wouldn't ever recognize it, but it does. But even just the core and straightforward combat is great too. You have endless possibilities at your disposal in how to play. For example, one of my companions was a barbarian who I spec'd into doing high damage with a high amount of strength, and in one fight, an enemy casted a spell that caused me to drop my weapon. So I picked up a nearby chair instead and threw it at them, and because of my high strength, it killed them instantly and turned them into a bloody mess. On my wizard, I grabbed as many damage and movement spells as possible, meaning every turn I was teleporting around the battlefield instantly on top of houses and high ledges and casting massive fireballs that lit the entire arena on fire. The items you get later into the game are really fantastic too, like one I found for my bard called Blazer of Benevolence, which gave me 4 temporary hit points every time I casted Bardic Inspiration, which completely solved my issue with my character being way too squishy since I built him as purely support with no damage or health. And there are a ton of other items that can affect specific spells or classes greatly, meaning you might literally change your entire build on a character because of an item you found that is just that good. I think this is a really great change from early access 2, where most things I found were honestly kind of boring and didn't change much. Once you get to Act 2 and beyond in this game, at times it can almost feel like a Borderlands or Diablo light title, with how much cool loot you will find at vendors with build-defining changes. And while I know this isn't exactly faithful to how it works at a D&D table, I think this is a welcome change for a video game that will probably take you well over 100 hours to complete. And as a loot goblin myself, I was so happy to see how much items can change your builds in-game. The gist though is that the combat in this game is absolutely fantastic. It's really tactical and rewards player creativity immensely. And that's not even getting into the new tadpole powers you can get after a certain point in the story that can vastly increase the power of your character, but at what cost? Having said all of that though, I imagine for some people they still won't enjoy this combat all that much because of its format and also its difficulty. If you really do just hate turn-based games and how much slower they are than real time, you might struggle getting into this game. But once again, I really do recommend you give it a couple of hours first, because as you get more spells and abilities, the things you can do in combat and the genius solutions you can come up with give you a satisfaction unlike anything else out there. You know how beating a boss in Dark Souls or Elden Ring is satisfying because it takes skill and wit and learning about the boss and encounter to master it? Baldur's Gate 3 has that same sense of satisfaction, but in my opinion on an even greater level because of the turn-based nature, which also adds an extra layer of tactical problem solving along with seemingly infinite out-of-the-box solutions to every engagement that most other players might never think of. However, with all that great power comes a lot of responsibility, and as you play, you're going to need to brush up on the rules and systems in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, because oftentimes you'll be fighting monsters you can't even hit or see, and without having a somewhat deep understanding of combat mechanics and how to get around certain situations, or even just basic things like why does my weapon attack keep missing, or how do I create a build that is somewhat competent, without that, it's going to be really hard to get through some of these encounters. Even on normal difficulty, you will struggle early on as a new player, but once you start figuring it out, it really is satisfying. So my biggest tip here is to just stick with it. You are going to fail a lot as a new player if you are one, so just take each loss as a learning experience and get better slowly. So now let's talk a little bit about the characters and the world, and also the biggest problem I have with this game so far. Because for me, RPGs live and die based on their worlds, companions, and lore. After all, they're the cornerstone of what we remember most about these types of games years later. First of all, Baldur's Gate 3 takes place in a universe called the Forgotten Realms. It's the most popular campaign setting for the Dungeons & Dragons tabletop game, and because of that, it has now decades of extensive and interesting lore to pull from. This isn't just goblins and ogres. There are interdimensional dragon-riding aliens, entirely foreign planes of existence, and a host of gods that terrorize the lands. And throughout Baldur's Gate 3, you get the chance to read tons of different books or talk to lots of different NPCs all over the world, and it's handled so well. You get to hear about remarkable people that you then later meet, or gods of immense power that you can call upon. And everything just feels like it has so much depth and history to it because, well, it does. It's pretty obvious that some of the writers and designers at Larian must be dungeon masters in their real lives because there is a ton of attention paid to this world and the respect it deserves. And that's coming from someone that never actually got into D&D myself, but now after only playing Baldur's Gate 3 for a short time, I can't get enough of this world and its lore. There are so many different locations that vary from scary to otherworldly to beautiful, and in each area there are new things to discover that teach you more about this fantastical world and the people, creatures, and politics within it. And this level of immersion is only heightened by all the fantastic quests. Each and every main, side, or companion quest you go on has multiple different permutations and possibilities, and it makes the story that much more engaging when all of the choices you make have a big effect on each mission, and those consequences carry over later into the game where you get to see how things played out. Like meeting a character who you saved earlier in the game, for example, and that leading to an entirely new quest line later, which for me is exactly what I like out of my quests and games. Their voice acting is great, the writing is impactful, and there are a lot of slow and fast-paced scenes alike with each character that really fleshes them out. I can't go into much depth here because I don't want to spoil anything, but pretty much every single character you meet and recruit to your party has a very compelling backstory. So much so that I had difficulties picking who I wanted to take with me on adventures because I wanted to know more about everyone. Luckily for us though, even if you don't take your party members out with you into the open world in different areas, you still get to see their story progress back at camp, albeit with lots of missing scenes you would have otherwise gotten had you brought them along. Another nice thing too is oftentimes characters will have things to say about other companions on the team, and their relationship to each other matters almost as much as your relationship to each of them. It makes it feel more like a team effort, and I'm hoping in the later stages of the game we will get even more Avengers level moments with everyone talking and interacting. But that remains to be seen. The one issue I did have with the characters though, and this is going to sound weird, but they are all way too damn horny. I swear at the start of the game, I felt like I was an attractive woman on Tinder, where absolutely anything I said or did, my companions responded with a resounding, "I see what you're saying, but we should have sex right now." Literally before I even had the chance to speak to and get to know any of these characters, they were heavily flirting with me and begging for some attention. And while I could only wish I had this effect on women in real life, in game it honestly just felt weird. I wish Larian had toned it down just a little bit. I get how cool it is being able to romance companions or have relationships with an actual bear, and I think that stuff is fine, but the characters and their stories and acting are so great on their own. I don't need them to desire me too quickly in order to get attached. In fact, I think they would have been better served to just make more of the characters sexually reserved at the start. Games often have this problem too, where relationships just feel weird and forced at first, and sadly, Baldur's Gate 3 very much has this problem in spades, and even later on the non-stop sexual innuendos can get tiring, even for a young single guy like me. Once you get past that hurdle though, these characters do have some really great moments that shine, and just based on how their arcs are progressing, I would imagine there are going to be some very heartfelt and memorable moments in Act 3. Another part I really enjoyed as well was the main story. It's something I once again basically can't talk about at all here since this is a non-spoiler first impressions, but suffice to say there are some really good twists and turns in here that will keep you engaged the whole way through. And by my estimation, having a great main goal for a game is always crucial, and Larian definitely did a good job here. I can't wait to see how the story progresses into the finale. And while I wish I could talk to you guys about more specific moments and things that happen that are so awesome, I'll have to save that for my full spoiler review when I finally am done with the game. In my opinion, it's the most impressive thing a game can do, because it's what separates games from other media like movies, books, and music. They can react to player input and agency and craft a narrative that will be completely personal to the person playing it. Games can give you that sense of pride that no other medium can, that sense that you accomplished something, you figured out the genius plan, it wasn't just a story already planned out. And last off, I want to voice any of the lingering concerns or thoughts I have about things that Larian could hopefully improve for the future. Because while this game is great, as I said, no game is perfect. First of all, there are some bugs and glitches here and there. If anything, it's a lot less than I was expecting with a game this big that also pushed its release early a month, but for sure, here and there you will see some lighting issues and flashing or random cups floating in the air in a cutscene, or even sometimes weird camera angles stuck in the ground. Bugs like this honestly don't bother me at all though in the slightest, so I have trouble even speaking to them because for other people, this could be very annoying for you, but for me, I was astounded at how well the game ran and how few bugs there were in the first place. I think with any project this ambitious, you have to provide some leeway. As a coder myself, I know the pain. The few bugs I did encounter though that were annoying were when a cutscene would randomly cut off mid-sentence or bug out. The few bugs I did encounter that were annoying though were when a cutscene would randomly cut off mid-sentence or bug out, or if one of my choices was registered by the game wrong and something incorrect happened. These were very rare, but obviously hurt the experience. But once again, nothing a quick reload can't salvage, and it was rare enough I wasn't bothered in the slightest. However, having said that, remember I haven't played the full game, and a majority of what I did play was from early access, meaning it probably is the most polished part of the entire journey. Outside of bugs though, most of my gripes would be minor quality of life fixes. For example, sometimes right after a combat encounter, an NPC will try to talk to you, but they will talk to whomever you were using last in combat, which may have been a companion who is bad at speaking, so it ruins the encounter and you either have to reload or accept being non-optimal. Maybe a fix here would be if someone else other than you starts a conversation, you can pick who speaks, with it defaulting to your character, which would otherwise be changed in the option menu. Another smaller gripe is that combat can take a long time sometimes. With the high miss chances, especially if you aren't using karmic dice in the options menu, along with low damage and high health pool enemies occasionally, the engagements can feel so drawn out at points, and I imagine a lot of the mainstream audience that plays this game may struggle in the bigger fights where there's so much going on and it takes forever, and if you lose, you gotta start over. I personally love it because of the challenge and tactical nature, but keep that in mind for anyone who is stepping into the genre for the first time. Outside of that, my only real major gripe with the game is how weirdly sexual the characters are, as I mentioned before, and sadly, this is probably something that can't be changed all that much. Just lessons for the future. But overall, most of my complaints are just smaller gripes or things that could potentially be fixed in a game that otherwise shines so brightly in so many ways.